A piece of raw land, it represents the apex of untapped potential. The height of really being able to leave your mark on the world for future generations. And that's why we're so passionate about it. But missteps along the way, to actually finding the right location for your project, it costs money, can derail developments, and can even stunt your business growth. Hey everyone, it's Matt Marsh, founder of Marsh & Partners. Marsh & Partners is a development and national consulting firm that helps business owners and investors maximize their real estate and transform their businesses. In this video, we're going to talk about real estate development site selection, but what goes into finding the right site and what avoidable mistakes most commonly force developers to abandon projects early. Well, we'll discuss all that and more in our latest addition to our video series, CRE Development Mistakes. Now, we've written on the site selection process before, so if you want a deep dive, there's a link in the video description and you can visit our blog to learn more. So I'm not going to cover all that here, but I do want to first start with a quick level set to make sure we're on the same page. Real estate development site selection, it's the actual process of finding a site and picking a plot of land to pursue a development project. Not all vacant land is created equal. Properties are subject to various influences that might impact the viability of a site. External factors like zoning restrictions, demographic trends, municipal ordinances, and the path of growth, they need to be considered. Conversely, site-specific factors like environmental considerations, necessary site work, utilities, property's highest and best use, they also need to be weighed. And I'll tell you, it's undoubtedly a lot to consider. And it means that some land might be better suited for specific projects than others. Farmland probably commands a different use than an urban infill site, for instance. And since there's a lot to consider, well, there are opportunities for mistakes along the way. I'll tell you, I've made my fair share of them, and they've cost me. They've cost my partners. But those failures, as both a developer and real estate consultant, they've helped shape my understanding of the process. So I wanted to distill some of those lessons learned during site selection miscues of my own to help you avoid them during your projects. Now, the first common mistake that almost invariably leads to project failure is allowing yourself to become a prisoner of the moment. At some point in our lives, we've all gotten wrapped up into the latest fad, or maybe the latest trend. Maybe you made an impulse purchase, or subscribed to a diet because your favorite podcaster told you to. And if you're shaking your head right now as I say that, you're either much stronger willed than I am, or you're probably lying to yourself. But the same goes for real estate. Developers get swept up into building trends all the time, and it happens for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're chasing dollars, or maybe it's just the path of least resistance. I'll tell you, decades ago, it was the single-family home building craze. Then, developers raced to build suburban office space to accommodate the increased number of rooftops. In the 90s and 2000s, mixed-use development saw a resurgence really as an answer to the increased urban sprawl that had developed. And now there's a huge focus on industrial and life science development, office conversions, and single-family build-to-rent projects. But if you've pursued some of those opportunities, was it a mistake? Not necessarily, especially if the underlying demand was justifiable, and maybe you made some money doing it. But too often, developers, they fail to consider whether market conditions and short-term opportunities are actually long-term trends. What demand drivers are motivating developers to supply a certain product, and are they sustainable? We even have a recent example to point to as a result of COVID. Work from home mandates, they forced offices to go vacant for 2020 and a better part of 2021. Many experts surmised, they said a vaccine, it was going to signal a return to normalcy, and office and hospitality real estate would experience a V-shaped recovery. But as 2021 continued, it was clear that the remote trend was, in large part here to stay. And one could argue that COVID was simply a short-term shock to a well-functioning business model. But if you look closely enough, the writing was on the wall even as early as 2018 or 2019. Employers were already shifting more work remotely with the availability of remote work tools. And COVID was merely a catalyst that accelerated what was already a major long-term market shift. Now, another common mistake made during the site selection process, it's the failure to weigh opportunity costs. This all begins with real estate strategy. Let's pretend you're a small business. You've outgrown your 10,000 square foot building. After a careful lease versus buy versus build analysis, we've determined that building a new location is probably the right answer. So the next step is to go out and find the right site for your business. Well, most business owners, they start looking for a site that can accommodate their space needs. If they've outgrown 10,000 square feet, well, then maybe you look for a site that allows for 15 to 20,000 square feet. But that binary approach to site selection, it often leaves many questions unanswered. Things like, how important is location to your business? How does location impact your ability to retain and hire new talent? Should you build a larger building, lease a portion of it out, and become a landlord? What are your business's long-term growth prospects? Should you find a site that allows for future expansion? And how do all of these variables actually impact the project? Because every location offers distinct strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. And you need to weigh your unique criteria to assess their importance to project success. Because ultimately, there will be opportunity costs that stem from these decisions. But if you've racked and stacked your needs properly, you can account for and mitigate downside risks as a result. Inadequate site due diligence it's another mistake developers make during site selection. It sounds obvious, but site due diligence, it's more than just the obligatory title work, environmental study. Thorough due diligence, it actually allows you to identify site issues before you've committed large amounts of money to a project. As a developer, you'll want to assess a variety of things. Things like topography and water features and wetlands, or access to utilities, environmental risks, zoning and design requirements, off-site improvements, municipal ordinances, even potential tax and development incentives. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's a place to start. If you're interested, what you can do, why don't you drop us a line? You can ask us about our comprehensive site due diligence checklist to help you on your next project, regardless of geography or location. But if you fail to address these important site issues early, you might be saddled with increased development costs, an improper valuation of what the property is worth on the acquisition side, or even roadblocks that could kill a project later on. Now, the last mistake I commonly see made really is a lack of flexibility. I often describe the real estate development process as a marathon. It's an exercise in patience, resilience, and your ability to creatively circumvent the challenges you'll inevitably face during a project. But, many developers, they take a one-size-fits-all attitude to development. They approach a project with an ideal site in mind, and they refuse to deviate from the strict parameters they've imposed on themselves. And what works in one municipality might not work in another. What works in one submarket might not work in another. And if you're not flexible, and you haven't mentally prepared yourself for those setbacks or that bad news, well, you're only going to grow frustrated and discouraged as that site selection process progresses. I often say that the perfect site doesn't exist. In many markets, if a piece of land's available for sale or a property remains undeveloped, well, as the industry says, there's likely some hair on it. The developers who remain agile and have the ability to pivot upon bad news, they're more often successful than their rigid counterparts. So ultimately, what's the key to avoiding these mistakes? A project, it might look good on paper, but an inadequate site can actually set your project up for failure. Variables change between projects, and it's important to consider the site selection miscues we've discussed in this video. You'll want to find the right civil engineer and familiarize yourself with the site selection and development processes before undertaking a real estate development. I want to thank everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and you can subscribe to our channel below. You can also follow us on Instagram at Marsh Partners Real Estate and check out our site for more real estate insights at marsh-partners.com. Feel free, if you're interested, you can leave us a comment, if there are any other topics you're interested in or you'd like me to cover in the future. And again, please don't forget to subscribe if you want more content like this, and thanks again for watching.